Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
They say if you want to find the truth, you ask a bartender, a priest, or an Irish lawyer. I don't drink enough to be the first, and I left the priesthood track the minute I discovered girls in spring baseball. That left Irish lawyer, which I leaned into so hard it became my brand. My name is Patrick O'Neill. I'm 42, a practicing attorney in a Midwestern city that thinks it's bigger than it is, and for most of my career people called me that honest Irish guy in court halls and bar associations. It started as a joke. Some opposing counsel tried to rattle me during a recess by saying, "Come on, O'Neill, everyone's got a price." I said, "Mine is absurdly high and payable only in Guinness and absolution." Word got around. Soon enough judges were making wisecracks like, if even O'Neill says his client didn't do it, maybe we should listen. I liked the reputation. A lot. My parents were immigrants, Dad drove a truck, Mom waitressed at 2 diners, and they'd raised me on 2 pillars: work hard, and don't be a gobshite. That last one is a formal theological concept where we're from. By 40, I had a modest practice, a decent townhouse, a gray and green tie collection that made me look more put together than I felt, and the thing I was proudest of, a marriage everybody thought was rock solid. Her name was Melissa. We met in the courthouse, obviously. Where else do lawyers meet people if not in that fluorescent cathedral of coffee, anxiety, and malfunctioning copy machines? She was a judicial assistant back then, working for a magistrate who specialized in making everyone miserable in traffic court. The first time I saw her, she was leaning over the clerk's counter, explaining some filing rule to a lost litigant with the kind of patience you don't see much in government buildings. Brown hair and a loose bun, glasses she didn't actually need but liked, expression like she'd seen every flavor of nonsense and still found the world sort of interesting. I slid my own motion across the counter and said, "Excuse me, Your Honor, I'd like to file for whatever it takes to get your number." She snorted. "That line worked better when I was 18, she said. "Filing window is on the left. My number is not included in the forms." "Do I need to request it through Discovery?" I asked. She rolled her eyes, but she smiled. "You lawyers," she said. "Always trying to get something for free." We bantered. Turned out she'd done a stint in law school before deciding she liked being close to the process without 6 figures of debt. She loved the mechanics of justice, the calendars, the motions, the way a piece of paper could move a life. I liked that about her. I liked a lot about her. She was sharp, funny, and somehow able to keep a docket of 80 cases straight without losing her mind. We started getting coffee from the same cart every morning. Then lunch in the courthouse cafeteria, finest rubber chicken in the Tri-County area, I told her. Then dinners that didn't involve plastic trays. When we got married, it was in a church with drafty windows, surrounded by more cops, clerks, and lawyers than family. The judge she worked for officiated. The DA and the public defender both gave toasts. I went home with the bride and 1,000 jokes about how I'd married into the system now. For a long time, I honestly thought I'd won at life. We built a rhythm. I'd go to court, wage my little wars, come home exhausted. She'd talk about her day, judges, motions, the way some poor prose litigant had addressed the court as "Your Majesty." On Sundays we'd sit on the couch with coffee and the paper, yelling at editorials and the sports section. She saw the worst of the legal system up close and still believed it could be better. I love that. When I'd get cynical, she'd tilt her head and say, "You're the honest Irishman, remember? You don't get to give up." If you told me then that one day she'd be the person threatening to blow up everything I believed about myself and the law, I'd have asked you what you've been drinking. But that's the thing about erosion. It doesn't start with a landslide. It starts with little pieces of rock wearing away, until one day the cliff gives out. The first small rock was time. Melissa started working later. "I'll be at the courthouse," she'd say, reaching for her blazer. "Judge Thompson's got me staying for post-hearing conferences. We're swamped." "Again?" I'd ask. "He doesn't know how to go home?" "Judges don't go home," she said. "They evaporate and reform on the bench the next day." Sometimes she'd come home with stories, complaining about new filing systems, or laughing about lawyers who didn't know how to mute themselves on Zoom. That was normal. Then the stories became vaguer. "Long day," she'd say, dropping her bag. "What happened?" I'd ask. "Oh, she'd reply. "Cases. Motions. People being people." She used to talk about we when she meant the whole staff. "We're redoing the docket. We're working on this new pretrial protocol." Suddenly it was he. He had me sit in on a lot of meetings today. He wanted my notes on several ongoing matters. He thinks I have a good eye for who's telling the truth. On its own, none of that would have raised alarms. Judges rely heavily on their assistants. And Thompson, newly appointed, ambitious, mid-50s with the kind of haircut that screamed "I still think I'm the smartest guy in the room," was known for leaning on his staff. But combine that with the fact that Melissa started avoiding certain conversations and you get that itch at the back of your neck. It was little things. Her phone face down on the table. A new lock screen code she didn't share. A joke I'd make about Married to the Job, and her laugh coming half a second too late. "Everything okay?" I asked one night as we did dishes. "You've been somewhere else lately." "I'm just tired," she said. "Court's crazy. We're buried. You wouldn't believe some of the stuff going on." "Try me," I said. "I've seen a guy try to represent himself with printed screenshots of Facebook as evidence." She smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes. "It's complicated," she said. "You hate when I talk about internal court politics anyway." That wasn't true. I love the gossip as much as the next lawyer. But I shrugged, backed off. I'm a big believer in letting people have a bad week or three without making it about me. Weeks turned into months. Then one afternoon, my friend Liam stopped by my office. I've known Liam Carter since law school. While I went to trial, he went to the clerk's office. Between us, we know where most of the bones are buried in our county. He closed the door behind him and sat down without being asked. That alone told me this wasn't a casual visit. "What's the matter?" I asked. "Somebody finally broke the coffee machine at the courthouse? Should I declare a state of emergency?" He didn't smile. Liam is freckled, red-haired, and usually looks like a kid who just found $5 on the sidewalk. Today he looked like somebody's dad about to give bad news. "You busy?" he asked. "Always," I said. "Never too busy for whatever that face is, though." He took a breath. I work late some nights," he said. "Finishing filings, juggling dockets, trying to keep judges from screaming at us." "I'm familiar," I said. "They scream at us too. Good cardio." "Right," he said. "So I was doing all that last week. Left late. Walked past Thompson's chambers. The new judge. Melissa's judge." The door was cracked, Liam went on. "I heard voices. Laughing." I frowned. "You creeping around listening at doors now?" I tried. "If I'd known who was inside, I'd have walked the other way," he said. "But I didn't. I looked in." His eyes met mine. "I saw Melissa," he said. "And Thompson. Together. After hours. Not talking about motions." The punch lands slow sometimes. You hear it before you feel it. "What do you mean together?" I asked, even though I knew. "Hope makes you stupid." He shifted. "She was on the edge of his desk," he said quietly. He was standing between her knees. They were close. The room seemed to tilt a little. I grabbed the edge of my desk. "You sure?" I said. "Old habit, you always ask a witness that, even if you trust them with your life." He nodded. "I wish I wasn't," he said. "I backed away before they saw me. I thought maybe I'd imagined it. But then I saw them leave 20 minutes later. Separate doors, but a minute apart, like they thought they were in a movie. Pat, I'm sorry." I stared at the framed photo on my shelf, me and Melissa at some bar association gala, her in a black dress, me in a suit that miraculously fit right, both of us laughing at some bad joke. Perfect picture, if you didn't know better. "Thanks," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "You did the right thing telling me." "I almost didn't," he said. "I didn't want to blow up your life. But then I thought you're you. You'd want to know, even if it hurts." He was right. It hurt. I went home that night moving on autopilot. Walked in. Hung up my coat. Listened to the sound of the shower upstairs. Melissa's shampoo smelled like citrus and some fancy flower I can never remember the name of. When she came down, hair damp, wearing one of my old t-shirts, she smiled. For once, it looked real. "Hey," she said. "Rough day?" "Something like that," I replied. We ate dinner, pasta, jarred sauce, garlic bread from the supermarket. I watched her talk about some trivial thing, nodding at the right places, waiting for a moment that felt right. It never came. I made one. "Liam stopped by today," I said, putting down my fork. "From the clerk's office." She froze for half a second. "Most people wouldn't notice. I'm a cross-examiner." I did. "Oh?" she said lightly. "How's he? Still drowning in paperwork?" "He said he saw you with Thompson," I said. "After hours. In his chambers." The air went out of the room. She set her glass down carefully. "He shouldn't be spying on judges," she said. "That's unprofessional." "That's not a denial," I said. She looked at me, really looked at me, and something shuddered behind her eyes. "What do you want me to say, Patrick?" she asked. Her voice was tight. "That we stayed late going over cases?" "We did." "That he relies on me for more than scheduling?" "He does." "That he appreciates me in ways you apparently don't?" There it was. The pivot. Turn the accusation into a referendum on me. "Are you sleeping with him?" I asked. No theatrics. Just the question. She hesitated just a fraction too long. "It's not that simple," she said. "It's a yes or no question," I said. "We both know it." "Yes," she snapped. "Okay? Yes. It happened. It's happening. Are you happy now?" "Happy. That word." "I'm a lot of things," I said. "Happy is not on the list." She stood up, pacing, hands in her hair. "You don't understand," she said. "You've never understood. You have your little practice, your moral high ground, your honest Irishman thing. People pat you on the head and say how noble you are while they hand the big cases to guys who'll actually play the game." "I like my little practice," I said, stung. "I sleep at night." "Well, I don't," she shot back. "Not the way we've been going. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch judges, lawyers, power players make decisions all day and know you'll never move beyond being the one who staples the files? Thompson sees more in me than you do." "He sees what he wants to see," I said. "Which happens to be you on his desk." She flinched, then hardened. "He's my ticket out," she said flatly. "Out of this small-time, stuck life. With him, I have a chance at a career that actually matters. With you I have your ideals and a two-bedroom townhome." "Those ideals are the reason you ever respected me," I said. "Once upon a time." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think I married you because you were noble?" she said. "No. I married you because you were safe. Nice. Predictable. I thought that would be enough. It's not." The words landed like bricks. "You could have just told me you were unhappy," I said softly. "We could have, I don't know. Talked. Made changes. Tried something. Instead, you changed teams and didn't bother telling me until the janitor saw you in extra innings." "Don't be dramatic," she said. "This isn't a sports movie. This is my life. And I'm done apologizing for wanting more than watching you tilt at windmills in court." "More," I repeated. "So what happens when your ticket gets bored?" "Judges have terms. Midlife crises. New assistants." "I'll land on my feet," she said. "I always do." She walked to the doorway, then turned back. "And don't you dare try to use any of this at work," she added. "If you try to go after him, I'll tell everyone you're just a bitter little man whose wife left him. No one will take you seriously. He has power. You have stories." She meant it. That's what startled me. The Melissa I'd married would have been horrified to hear herself say that. The Melissa standing in my kitchen looked relieved. Like she'd finally dropped a heavy bag. After she went to bed, I sat at the table alone, The clock ticking too loudly. 42 and humiliated. 42 and suddenly feeling every year. I thought about packing a bag. Throwing her out. Marching into Thompson's chambers and breaking his nose, then my own career. Instead, I did nothing. For a day. Then two. Sometimes, when your whole world shifts, your brain just buffers. I went to work. I filed motions. I met with clients. I stood in court and argued about discovery deadlines while, in the back of my mind, a loop plate of my wife on someone else's desk. When the adrenaline crash finally hit, it wasn't with rage. It was with something worse, emptiness. I remember one night sitting on the couch in the dark, tie loosened, a beer warming in my hand, thinking, maybe she's right. Maybe I am just a guy with ideals and no power. Maybe that's all I'll ever be. Then another thought muscled in, slow and steady. I'm an attorney. I know the law better than either of them. And they're messy humans. Messy humans make mistakes. Especially when they think they're untouchable. That was the spark. The inner lion people talk about. Mine doesn't roar. It goes very quiet and starts making lists. I didn't want revenge for its own sake. I'm not that poetic. What I wanted was simple, the truth on the record. About my marriage, sure, but more about the guy in the black robe who decided the rules didn't apply to him. You spend enough time in courthouses, you develop a sixth sense about which judges cut corners. Nothing blatant. Just little things. Rulings that always broke a certain way. Cases that moved faster when certain lawyers were involved. Rumors of ex-party conversations, off-the-record chats that aren't supposed to happen. With Thompson, the rumors had been getting louder. Whispers about him meeting privately with certain attorneys. Odd docket shuffles. A clerk who quit abruptly and wouldn't say why. Melissa had joked, early on, that he trusts me more than he should. I'd laughed it off then. Now, it sat in my memory like a loaded gun. I started paying attention. I asked Liam, casually, about certain cases on Thompson's docket. Didn't that one jump the line? I'd say. Thought it was behind 3 others. He'd shrug, look uncomfortable. Judge's discretion, he'd say. You know how it is. I looked at the public records on a few matters. Saw patterns. A motion granted here that looked thin. A ruling there that read like it had been drafted by someone with a very particular interest. Gut feeling is not evidence. I needed more. Which is how I found myself doing something I never thought I'd do, planning a secret recording. Now, before every ethics professor in the country faints, let me be clear, recording someone without their knowledge is a legal minefield. Some states are one-party consent for conversations. Some aren't. I happen to practice in a jurisdiction where, if you're part of the conversation, you can legally record it without the other person's consent. You can't bug rooms or tap phones. But you can carry a recorder in your own pocket. So I did. I knew Melissa's patterns. So did Liam. When she and Thompson stayed late, it wasn't for the joy of fluorescent lights. They'd meet under the guise of reviewing sensitive matters. If I could get Thompson talking about those matters, maybe he'd say the quiet part out loud. The opportunity came faster than I expected. Thompson called me one afternoon to stop by his chambers about a motion I'd filed in one of his cases. I wasn't wild about ex-party invitations, but refusing outright can hurt your client. So I scheduled a time, put on my least rumpled suit, and before I left my office, I slipped a digital recorder into my breast pocket and double-checked that it was on. I told myself I was there to discuss a motion. I told myself I might not get anything. I told myself a lot of things as I walked down that hallway. His chambers were exactly what you'd expect, wood-paneled, shelves of books nobody's opened in years, a few aggressively framed diplomas to remind you he's important. Melissa was there, sorting files at a side table. "Patrick," he said, standing, hand extended. "Good to see you." I shook his hand. His grip was firm, his smile perfectly calibrated. "Judge," I said. "Melissa." She looked at me, cheeks flushed. "Patrick," she said. Her voice was neutral. I'd heard the tone when she answered robocalls. "Have a seat," he said, gesturing to a leather chair. I wanted to chat informally about your motion to suppress in State v. Ramirez. We talked. For a while it was all above board. He asked about my argument, about case law, about my client's background. I answered, careful, measured. Melissa kept her eyes on the files. Then he veered. You know, Patrick, he said, leaning back, it would make my life a lot easier if more attorneys handled their business the way you do. You file on time. You don't grandstand. You don't make trouble. Trouble, I repeated. You mean appeals? He chuckled. Among other things, he said. Judges like predictability. Dockets like it too. Justice likes accuracy, I said. Old habits. He waved a hand. Oh, sure, he said. In the big things. But you know as well as I do that most of this, he tapped a stack of files, is theater. People want an answer. I give it to them. The system is more than theater, I said, a little heat creeping in. He eyed me. You're one of those idealists, he said, almost fondly. Melissa warned me. My jaw tightened. Warned you, I repeated. She said you get emotional about process, he went on. You care a lot about things being perfect. It's admirable. But perfection isn't what keeps this place running. Efficiency is. I care about process, I said, because that's what separates us from a coin flip. He smiled, indulgent. If you knew half of what happens in these halls, he said, you'd sleep even less than you already do. Then tell me, I said. Educate me. It was a risk. But guys like Thompson love to talk. Especially when they think they're enlightening the lesser mortals. He glanced at Melissa. She hesitated, then shrugged, as if to say, your call. Off the record, he said. Of course, I lied. He stood, walked over to the window, looked out over the city like he was surveying his kingdom. Do you know how many cases I have on my docket this term? He asked. A lot, I said. 217 active, he said. Appeals, motions, hearings. I am one man. I have one assistant. He nodded toward Melissa, who is overqualified and underpaid. If I followed every rule in the book, read every page, held every argument, nothing would get done. So I triage. Everyone triages, I said. That's what discretion is. Exactly, he said. Discretion. I prioritize cases that matter. The rest, he waved a hand. They get streamlined. Streamlined how? I asked. He turned, eyes glinting. Some decisions, he said, write themselves. Prosecution asks for something reasonable, I grant it. Defense asks for something absurd, I deny it. Half the time I don't need to read beyond the summary. Summaries written by who? I asked. He smiled. My staff, he said. Primarily Melissa. She knows what I want. She filters. I looked at her. She looked at the floor. That's a lot of power for one assistant, I said. She's earned it, he replied. And she understands the bigger picture. We keep the wheels moving. We keep the numbers looking good. We give the public the appearance of a well-oiled machine. Appearance, I said. That's your word. Come on, Patrick, he said, laughing. Drop the act. You don't really think every case gets the same attention, do you? Big donors, important players, they get more eyes. Some defendants get their files nudged higher in the pile. That's how it is. Always has been. Nudged by who? I asked. He shrugged. Sometimes by me. Sometimes by counsel who know how to make their priorities clear. Sometimes by Melissa, when she flags something as worth our time. So when you streamline, I said, you mean? He sat back down, steepling his fingers. In practical terms? He said. Sometimes we sign orders prepared by one side without rewriting them. Sometimes we adopt findings wholesale. Sometimes we lose a motion until after it's functionally moot. Sometimes we look the other way on deadlines if the right person asks. He was confessing to half the things attorneys complain about in bars but never prove. Isn't that, I paused, choosing the word carefully, problematic? It's efficient, he said. If I don't play ball, I drown. And before you get on your high horse, your clients benefit too. You just don't see it. And the ones who don't benefit? I asked. He shrugged. They shouldn't have hired idiots, he said. It wasn't a smoking gun. It was a lot of smoke. Then he added a match. There was that Ramirez case you're on now, he said. Public defender originally. Filed some boilerplate motion to suppress. Melissa read it and said, "This is junk." I denied it without a hearing. He chuckled. "Now you're on it," he said. "Frankly, I wouldn't have given the first guy 10 minutes. But you? You'll get a fair shot. That's bias too, if you want to get technical." I looked at Melissa again. Her jaw was clenched, eyes fixed on a file, knuckles white. "How many other motions get denied without you reading them?" I asked. "A few," he said. "Maybe more than a few. You really want to audit that?" He shook his head. "You don't have the stomach. You like the idea of the law too much. The reality would break your heart." "I'm not sure we're talking about my heart," I said. He waved, as if bored. "Anyway," he said. "File your supplemental brief. I'll read it. Probably. That's more than most get." Meeting over. I walked out, my recorder warm against my chest, my heart pounding. Melissa followed me into the hall. "Patrick," she started. "Don't," I said, not looking at her. "You can't use that," she whispered. "Whatever you think you're doing." "I came to talk about my client," I said. And instead I heard a judge admit to rubber stamping cases and playing favorites. What I do with that is now very much in question. She grabbed my arm. "If you report him, you'll drag me down with him," she said. "You know that. They'll say I was part of it. They'll look at every file I touched. They'll take my job, my career. All because you're hurt. They'll take his robe because he broke the rules," I said. "They'll take whatever they need to, because that's what happens when you treat justice like a menu. And I'm hurt, yes. But this stopped being just about us the minute he admitted he doesn't read half the things he signs." "You won't do it," she said. "You don't have it in you. You're all talk. Righteous speeches, no follow-through." She walked away. It's funny. After all the fireworks of the past weeks, discovering the affair, the arguments, the humiliation, that little line is what lit the fuse. "You don't have it in you." I went back to my office and listened to the recording. Twice. 3 times. I made a transcript. I annotated it. I cross-checked his self-admitted streamlining with public records of suspiciously formulaic orders. Then I did what honest Irish lawyers do when faced with a mess, I went up a level. Every state has some version of a judicial conduct board, a place where citizens and attorneys can file complaints about judges. Most of those complaints go nowhere. "Judge was mean to me" doesn't get you far. Judge admitted to systematically rubber stamping orders, playing favorites, and denying motions without reading them. On the other hand, that's at least worth a meeting. I drove to the state's Judicial Oversight Office, a bland building full of very serious people who spend their days sorting genuine grievances from sore loser rants. I asked to speak to someone about filing a formal complaint. They gave me a form and a polite smile. I cleared my throat. "I have an audio recording of a sitting judge describing how he falsifies the appearance of process in his courtroom," I said. "I'd like to make sure it doesn't get lost in the stack." That got me a different sort of smile. Within an hour, I was in a conference room with an investigator and an attorney from the board. I handed over my transcript, my notes, my little digital recorder. I laid out what I'd heard, the context, the jurisdiction's recording laws. I did not mention my wife's extracurriculars. This wasn't about my marriage, and I didn't want them thinking it was just a personal vendetta. They listened. I watched their faces. By the time the recording clicked off, both of them looked like they'd aged a year. "Mr. O'Neill," the attorney said slowly, "this is significant." "So I'm not crazy," I said. "Good to know. Has the judge indicated this pattern elsewhere?" The investigator asked. "Do you know of other attorneys he's told these things to?" "Not in so many words," I said. "But a lot of us have suspected something. His rulings, the timing, The way certain firms seem to get more traction. I can help you identify cases that might be worth a closer look. They thanked me. Asked a million questions. Told me they'd need time to review, to corroborate, to decide whether to escalate. I knew that was code for this is going to take a while and make everyone very nervous. Meanwhile, back in our little city, the rumor mill cranked into overdrive. Somehow, small miracle, it stayed vague for a bit. There's an investigation into Thompson, people whispered in hallways. Something to do with his decisions. Attorneys speculated, clerks speculated, even the security guard speculated. Melissa put on a brave face at work, I heard. Carried herself like everything was normal. At home, we existed in a Cold War. Same house, separate bedrooms. Minimal words. Maximum tension. A few weeks later, the hammer dropped. The state board opened a formal inquiry. That triggered an automatic review by our state Supreme Court. They pulled random samples of his orders. They interviewed staff. One brave former clerk finally told them about times she'd been ordered to draft rulings granting motions before responses were due, or to prioritize cases for friends of Chambers. Melissa got called in, of course. She had two options, lie and risk perjury, or tell the truth and implicate herself. From what little I heard, she chose poorly at first. Tried to downplay. Everyone does it. Just efficiency. But paper trails are cruel. When they showed her orders with her initials and his signature, inconsistent timelines, emails, she cracked. Admitted more than she meant to. The end game was swift by judicial standards. The Supreme Court issued an opinion. Judge Thompson had violated the canons of judicial ethics by delegating core decision-making functions to staff, by failing to adequately review filings, and by allowing extrajudicial factors to influence his rulings. They stripped him of his position. Conferred the bar. There was language like eroded public confidence and profoundly troubling. He was done. Melissa, as his assistant turned quasi-gatekeeper, was not spared. The state bar opened its own proceeding. Even though she wasn't a practicing attorney, she was a licensed JD working in a quasi-legal capacity. They found that she'd participated in conduct that undermined the integrity of the process, screening cases based on personal criteria, drafting orders that short-circuited advocacy, failing to report the judge's misconduct. They couldn't disbar her exactly, because she wasn't in active practice. But they revoked her license, barred her from future admission, and issued a public censure. Her career in law, such as it was, ended right there. The notice ran in the legal paper in small but deadly type. In re, Melissa Grant, formerly admitted, license no. Forex, license revoked, barred from practice, for conduct prejudicial to the administration of justice. When the dust settled, people asked me if I felt vindicated. Yes, I'd say. And no. Yes, because a judge who treated people's lives like items on a to-do list had been removed. Yes, because the rumors that had undermined trust in our courts had been proven and addressed. No, because I'd lost my marriage in the process. No, because part of me still remembered the Melissa who'd believed in the law the way I did. We divorced quietly. No screaming matches in court, no dramatic speeches. Just a series of signed forms, a split of assets, and a line in a docket somewhere. When the judge at our divorce hearing, different judge, mercifully, asked, irreconcilable differences. I almost laughed. Is that what we're calling it now? I nodded anyway. In the months after, a funny thing happened. Clients started calling more. Not less. Some were old clients who'd seen my name mentioned, obliquely, as the attorney who brought concerns to the state. Others were new referrals from colleagues who said, if you want someone who'll fight clean, go to O'Neill. I'd always had a decent caseload. Suddenly, I had more than I could handle. I also had something else, a clearer sense of what I wanted my practice to look like. For years, I'd shared an office suite with a couple of other solo practitioners. Good people, bit scattered. We split rent and coffee. I handled everything from small business disputes to the occasional criminal defense case, whatever paid the bills and let me sleep at night. Now, I wanted to be more intentional. Less general legal handyman, More if something feels off and you want someone who won't cut corners, this is where you go. So I did what middle-aged men in American cities do when their life blows up and then sort of lands upright. I rebranded. I leased a slightly larger office, still in an old building with creaky elevators, because I'm sentimental. Hired a paralegal to keep me from drowning in admin. Then I sat down with a cheap notebook and tried to come up with a name that didn't sound like a superhero franchise or a personal injury ad. O'Neill Law was too bland. O'Neill Associates felt like I was lying. I had no associates. O'Neill Sons was premature and would have frightened my mother. In the end, I went with the thing people had always half-joked about anyway. O'Neill Justice Honor. Corny? Sure. A little on the nose? Absolutely. Did it make me smile the first time I saw it on the door? Yeah. It did. Friends teased me. You opening a law firm or a Celtic pub? Liam asked. Maybe both, I said. Client meetings in the front, Guinness in the back. I built the firm around simple rules. We tell clients the truth, even when it hurts. We don't take cases where we have to lie. We don't cozy up to judges. We do the work. We keep records that would make auditors weep with joy. We don't put on capes, but we do show up. One of my first big cases under the new banner was a small business owner who believed a city inspector had retaliated against him for not hiring a councilman's nephew. Old me would have handled it quietly, maybe nudged it along. New me dug in, filed public records requests, found emails that made certain people sweat, and got the guy a fair review. Word got around. At bar events, people would clap me on the shoulder and say, "Only you, O'Neill, would go after a judge like that." It was either that or take up woodworking, I'd say. And I'm terrible with my hands unless there's a statute attached. Sometimes younger lawyers ask me if I regret any of it. Regret is a strong word, I say. Do I wish my wife hadn't decided to hitch herself to a rotten star? Yes. Do I wish I hadn't needed to be the one to report a judge? Also yes. I'd have preferred life to be boring and mildly content. But given what I knew, I don't regret what I did with it. They nod, like they understand, even if they don't yet. In softer moments, usually late at night in the office when the cleaners have gone and it's just me and the hum of the vending machine, I think about Melissa. I wonder if she ever looks back and wishes she'd picked differently. I wonder if she still tells herself the story that I was just an idealist who couldn't handle reality. I wonder if she's found a way to be okay outside the courts. I don't call. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. Instead, I focus on the people who still believe, against all evidence, that the law can be something other than a game. There's a kid I mentor now, a first-generation law student who reminds me of myself at 22, full of fire and unjaded, believing every wrong can be righted if you just find the right argument. He asked me once, "Is it true you took down a judge?" "I filed paperwork," I said. "The judge took down himself. He just needed a mirror." He grinned. "I want to be like that," he said. "Like you." I almost told him to aim higher. Then I thought about the me from a few years ago, sitting in the dark with a warm beer, convinced I was old, stupid, and powerless. "Just remember," I told the kid, "being the honest one isn't glamorous. Half the time it feels like you're the only sober person at a party. But when the music stops, people are very glad you drove." He wrote that down like it was profound. Maybe it is. If there's a moral here, and I'm a lawyer, we like those, it's this. Being the honest Irishman isn't a costume you put on for the jury. It's a choice you make when nobody's watching, when the cost is personal, when the easy thing would be to look away. Sometimes it blows up your life. Sometimes it builds you a new one. And sometimes, when you're locking up the office late, you look at the name on the glass, O'Neill Justice Honor, and you think, could have been just Patrick O'Neill, guy who got cheated on and kept his head down. Instead, you turned a mess into a line you can live with. Could be worse. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the AEN Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.